What's up, guys? I'm the East Coaster fan, and today we are here to mourn the loss and explore the legacy of Six Flags America. I'll be honest, this is a big one for me. In the past, I've done attractions closing, and we've had big ones in this rip series. Last year, almost a year ago exactly, we had King Ka closing, and that was just a monumental closure in the roller coaster enthusiast community. But in my own lifetime as an enthusiast, I've never seen a massive park close until today. I am filming this video the day that the park has closed. In fact, the park closed about 2.5 hours from when I am recording this video. And it's just a really interesting thing to go through. A bit of a history lesson. In the 2000s, you had a few major park closures. In 2005, you had Six Flags Astroworld, which a lot of people are comparing to Six Flags America right now. On the Legacy Cedar Fair side, you also had Geauga Lake. When Cedar Fair acquired the Paramount Parks, it wasn't long after until Geauga Lake bit the dust. In 2010, you had Kentucky Kingdom, and that was a few years right before I really started getting into the weeds of roller coasters. And that was a big closure in its time. But for right now, I mean, Six Flags America, especially living on the East Coast, is one of the biggest park closures I've ever seen. And it's no surprise seeing how long this park operated for. It's been around in some form for over 50 years. In 1974, the park opened as the Wildlife Preserve and eventually became Wild World in the 1980s. This eventually became Adventure World in the beginning of the 1990s, and then right before the turn of the millennium is when it became Six Flags America. Now, when it became Six Flags America, some people define this as the turning point for the park, as this was really the time when a lot of investments were going into all the properties. And with Six Flags America, you got rides like Superman Ride of Steel, Batwing, and really the whole back area of the park behind the Wild one. But after that moment, it feels like Six Flags America has been stagnant for what feels like 25 years. Now, don't get me wrong, there's been additions here and there. Like, they added Harley Quinn, there's Amperla Discovery, Wonder Woman, which is a really fun skyscraper model. But it was never enough to get people to go to Six Flags America. And I think that is one of the major problems that the park faced over its time. Just, it wasn't able to attract people. It might be one of the biggest wastes of potential I've ever seen in a park. This park's located right outside the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, only a few minutes away even from the Commander Stadium. It is a pretty easy park to access, but then came other things about it. First, the quality. You don't keep up with a park for very long, people are gonna know that you're not really putting much attention into it, and that leads people to go elsewhere. And then comes things like reputation, and unfortunately for Six Flags America, it didn't really have the best reputation. Now, I'm not saying that it's a completely horrible park, because even at a park like Six Flags America, there's a few gems in there that we'll talk about when we get into the roller coasters. But especially during times like Fright Fest, when things would sometimes get out of control and make the news, sometimes you'd have people have negative guest experiences and then spread them online. It just seemed, from an outsider's perspective, like a park that you didn't want to visit. And that's a shame, because that's really the thing that requires a park to stay open and make their guests happy. Now, there was also the Hurricane Harbor side, and I'll give the park credit because that is a part of Six Flags America that I think is often overlooked. You have this awesome water park. They even added a water coaster there a few years back. They have a lot of great water slides in there, and overall it seemed like it was very popular. So I'm curious that they eventually decide to close the entire park and not do what they did with Geauga Lake and just leave the water park open. But enough about that. I want to spend some time deep diving into this park too, because again, there's a lot to cover here and I'm sure I'm gonna miss a lot of it. But because this is East Coaster fan, I'm gonna start off by talking about the roller coasters. Starting off with Batwing, which is the Vekoma Flying Dutchman. I got the chance to ride Batwing as well as all the other coasters at Six Flags America, so I'll give my opinions on each of them as we go through, but Batwing was a really fun ride in my opinion. It was a lot more intense than the traditional flyer, albeit Manta and Tatsu are still more intense than the better rides. but I mean, it was better in my opinion than Superman Ultimate Flight at Great Adventure. With the closure, the model is now extinct, and it was really sad to see this ride close early. It closed towards the very end of summer after a really weird incident where the lead car came off. That was odd, but a very Six Flags America way of letting that ride go. Another important coaster is Firebird. Now, this is another one that I'm not a fan of, personally. When you went on this course, you would bang your head all around. But I am going to acknowledge that it is a very historic ride. This is the first B&M roller coaster. It originally opened at Six Flags Great America as Iron Wolf, a stand-up coaster, got relocated to Six Flags America as Apocalypse the Ride, I think in 2013, and then it eventually became Firebird when it adopted floorless trains. So again, Firebird, not a fan of, but it is a very historic ride and it is sad to lose. I'm going to skip over Great Chase because that's just the kiddie coaster. But then after that we have Joker's Jinx, a premier spaghetti bowl roller coaster. Basically the same model as Flight of Fear, but this one's completely outdoors. And I'll be honest, this might have been my favorite ride in this park. You have the great launch that you get from these premier LIM roller coasters, and the best part about it is that it had no mid-course brake run, meaning you were ripping through that second half real fast. And personally, I found it to be like much smoother than the Flight of Fear clones. I don't know why, because it's outdoors, you'd think it would be affected by the elements and everything, but I just really liked Joker's Jinx. It was my kind of ride. What was not my kind of ride was the Vekoma SLC, formerly named Mind Eraser, but then it became Professor Screamore's Skywinder, and this was actually my 150th roller coaster, as I stated in my blog. I don't know why I chose an SLC as that, but it's funny. As of the recording of this video, this is still my only SLC that I've ever ridden, so I think it's kind of what you expect. I will say though, the new trains did help a lot, and I hope those are sent elsewhere. What I also hope is sent elsewhere is Raging Cajun, the Reverchon spinning Wild Mouse. And this is the last credit I got there. I just got it this past year on Easter. And you spun a lot on this ride. And I don't know what they do to this attraction to make it spin so much, but I'm down for it, and I hope if this ride does get relocated, it has that same action going for it. But anyway, on to our next roller coaster, we have Roar. This was the oldest operating GCI roller coaster. I saw on Instagram though that with the closure of Roar, the oldest GCI now is Lightning Racer, which is kind of weird. I didn't get to ride Roar in 2025, but I definitely remember my ride in 2021 during my first visit, and I was not a fan. It just didn't track well, and maybe it got better during the years after my visit, but I just wasn't super impressed with Roar, and it's not going to get saved, unfortunately. Leading now to the tallest and maybe most iconic coaster in the park, Superman Ride of Steel. It has a very interesting layout, to say the least. I mean, it has a bit of straight track that really makes no sense. But it's because it's a clone of the one at Darien Lake, so a version of the ride still exists. However, it's always sad losing a large-scale roller coaster like this, especially a hyper coaster. And it also means that there are no more coasters called Superman Ride of Steel, which is kind of weird because you feel like that name, Superman Ride of Steel, is like just everywhere, but no, it's done after this. And yeah, I mean, this is a fun hyper coaster. All hyper coasters are a lot of fun in my opinion, but I'm not gonna say it was one of my favorites. Like I said, the layout isn't great, that straight track especially, but even the helixes just felt exaggerated to the point where it wasn't really doing anything for me. I just tend to like the more dynamic rides, and maybe it was because it was one of the older hyper coasters, but was just never the biggest fan of it. It was just fine. But to end off talking about the roller coasters of Six Flags America, we're ending off on a really sore subject of the closure of the park, and that's the Wild One. The Wild One is a very historic roller coaster. In fact, it's over 100 years old. With Leap the Dips currently SB&O, the Wild One was the oldest operating roller coaster in America. Which is so sad to lose in my opinion, because it was a really good ride. And the story continues to be amazing because this ride was relocated to Six Flags America, or I guess Wild World at the time. It's very rare to see wooden coasters relocated because of the amount of labor that has to go into it. It's very tricky. But the Wild One defied odds and made its home at Six Flags America, where it continued to operate until today. And this was another one of my favorites in the park, just because of how it rode very well honestly, for how old it is. And just, it's a fun wooden coaster. Especially that helix at the end. You got some great laterals on that section of the ride. But yeah, that's a tough one to lose, especially being a roller coaster enthusiast. But I also want to talk about some of the other flat rides this park had. I mentioned before the Zamperla Discovery and the Skyscreamer model, both themed to DC characters. But you also had a very rare water attraction in Penguin's Blizzard River. You had an Intamin Shoot the Chutes that just decided to randomly open for this season. Hey, at least it decided to show up for its inevitable final season. You had an Intamin second generation drop tower. I never got to experience it, unfortunately, but it looked like a fun model. And one that isn't really talked about much, but I want to focus on their wave swinger because it might be one of the best I've ever seen. It just looked amazing. If I want to describe Six Flags America to someone who had never visited, I would say that the front half of the park really differed from the second half behind Wild One. I mean, take a look at the map. Everything in front of Wild One seems a lot more complete, and then you go beyond that into Gotham City, everything's just placed randomly. You got paths going everywhere like I'm playing Planet Coaster, and don't even get me started on the placement of Batwing. It makes no freaking sense. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of my view of Six Flags America as an enthusiast, as a visitor, and just as a general park goer. But with a ripped video of this magnitude, I really wanted to showcase the thoughts and opinions of those who called Six Flags America their home. So without further ado, I'd like to invite some fellow enthusiasts to give their thoughts.
Hello, this is Blue Diamond Coasters, and Six Flags America actually means a lot to me. So growing up in Delaware, Six Flags America was actually my closest Six Flags park. I've been to Great Adventure a lot more, but early on, Six Flags America I went to more often just because it was closer for us to get to. And I have a ton of great memories from going to that park. My first visit was back in 2011, and I went with my Boys and Girls Club summer camp as kind of our end of the summer field trip. So my first ever Six Flags coaster was actually Roar, and I still remember riding that with my summer camp friends. In 2017, I met my first big coaster YouTuber at Net Coaster Studios at Six Flags America, and you can actually still find a younger me in one of his videos. I've also been to a lot of Ace events at the park, and I've won a couple big items, such as behind me a old sign from their old rodeo ride, along with recently this panel from Batwing that I got I guess a few months ago, and the back of a Mind Eraser seat from when they changed out the old train. This is really cool thing to have, especially now that the park is closing. One of my other favorite memories is me filming a bit of their stunt show and turning it into a quick 7-second TikTok, which got 7 million views and is still to this day the highest viewed thing I've ever created. I'm kind of shocked how that happened. So I'd like to say thank you, Six Flags America, for all the great memories. I'm gonna be there for your last day and give you a proper send-off.
Hello, my name is Cam from Hyper Thrills on Instagram. I'm not making this video necessarily for me, as my home park is Six Flags Great Adventure, but more for my cousin down in Maryland, whose home park is Six Flags America. Over the years, him and I have traveled, not traveled all over the place. We went down to Carowinds last summer. We went to Virginia. We've been to Hershey, Great Adventure, Dorney multiple times. But really, where it started for him was Six Flags America. For him, he is quite sad about it because, one of his favorite coasters is Batwing. And he was sad he couldn't get a final goodbye on it. The last time he rode it was back in 2022. And, he likes Superman, he likes Wild One. And, he is quite sad about it now that his home park will be, unfortunately, closing at the end of this weekend. I feel for him. We did a visit back in June, and we had an average day at Six Flags America, but we tried to make it as special as we could just because it was the last visit for both of us at the same time. Rip to the OG B&M from the B&M stand.
Hey, I'm Kaylee, Wonderflash. I have been with this park for 25 years. This has basically been my home park. My whole family has history with this park. My grandfather has been going for 50 years now. And we all have a lot of history with this park, and we have made a lot of great memories. I also have worked at this park for a couple years. I have made a lot of friends and families with the employees. It is phenomenal community in this park. If you know, you know. And I guess one of my favorite memories would have to be my grandfather every time I'd take him to the park, because there's always something new coming out that he's going to tell you about the park. And I think it's so cool to actually hear the stories of seeing Wild World, Adventure World, and Six Flags America, and the safari from the wildlife preserve. So I guess that's what's one of my favorite memories, is just seeing my grandfather tell me his stories and conveying it on to me. So there you go.
Thank you to everyone who helped participate in this dedication to Six Flags America. Let's talk about the final day, which I was watching like a hawk, honestly, today. As an outsider, I was really happy that the park was getting a lot of attention. I mean, those are some of the longest lines I've ever seen at that park. And for the most part, it seemed like everything went well and the park really handled it like a champ. So, you go, Six Flags America. Except Superman Ride of Steel, that just broke and they kicked everyone out of the queue. That's like the worst way a coaster can close, in my opinion. You can say, hey, it's Six Flags America, I guess. Which is sort of just the general statement from enthusiasts about Six Flags America. But once again, I do know that Six Flags America meant a lot to park goers, locals, so I'm not using this video to call out the park in any way. I'm using it as a place to celebrate what it was. And if you're watching this in the future, this might be probably the most documented defunct park we've ever had. So with that being said, I think I've covered everything I want to with Six Flags America. I am gonna miss it, but I'm also disappointed that this park never reached the potential that it could have had. Instead, you had locals going further to Great Adventure, King's Dominion, Hershey Park, and much more. I don't know what the future holds, honestly, for Six Flags America or its land. Who knows what's gonna happen. My hope, though, is that we don't get a repeat of Six Flags Astroworld. That'll be negative for both Six Flags and us as the consumer. And I just feel, honestly, for everyone who lost a home park today. I would be devastated if I was in the same situation. So I'm feeling for you guys, really. So with that being said, I'm gonna give one big final farewell to Six Flags America. May you rest in peace.